Hello friends, we will start upon the sonnet written by William Wordsworth, composed upon Westminster Bridge, September 3, 1802. Now, before coming to the analysis of this sonnet, we must first understand the backdrop of the situation and what kind of metric structure this poem follows. This is a sonnet. Now, what is a sonnet? A traditional sonnet is made up of 14 lines. Now, the first 8 lines is called the octave, and the last 6 lines is called the sestet. Now, the octave provides the structure, the theme, and the sestet provides the conclusion. Now, this sonnet is the Italian form of the sonnet, written mainly in iambic pentameter, and Wordsworth has purposely constructed it in a way that the lines 3, 4, 5, and 12 are only in iambic pentameter, but the syntax and caesura interrupt the steady beat. It reflects upon the uncertainty and oddity of the same. Wordsworth must have purposely constructed it this way to highlight the unusual nature of his subject. Now, coming to the understanding of the backdrop of that time. During the time of 1802, we must understand one thing: the Anglo-Spanish War was going on. Now, this war was going on for many years, and 1802 falls in between that time range. As well as, after some years, England will have its industrial revolution. Now, with the advent of the industrial revolution, we can understand that nature will be somewhere tainted because of the several byproducts of industries. And during that time, as humanity, the civilization is going towards the advent of modernity with the industrial revolution, we can understand how things were undertaken on that time and how they were never environment friendly, causing different levels of pollution and effects to several communities, both natural community and common people. Now, when we understand this poem, we understand this time of England. Composed upon Westminster Bridge, September 3, 1802, is William Wordsworth's sonnet to the capital city of London. When did Wordsworth write that sonnet? When he was going to the port of Dover with his sister Dorothea. In the morning, he was perplexed by the nature, by the beauty of the nature. And we all know that Wordsworth was a romantic poet. His romanticism is very much evident from all of his poems. And by the inspiration of that nature, of the surroundings around him, he found the beauty inside that, and he reflected it in his poem. Now, this sonnet describes the city of London very well, in a more romantic manner, that the realists will never like, maybe, because there is a kind of conflict between the realists and the romanticists, or the romantics, we can say, in this poem. Now, this was obviously written before the full effects of the Industrial Revolution had reached the metropolis. Wordsworth and his sister, I already said, were en route for Paris actually, but before they were having to go to the port of Dover in July 1802 during that time. Imagine, and an early dawn, hardly anyone on the streets, when along comes a carriage and horses, stopping temporarily to take in the view over the river Thames. Now, this was the time. Pure calm and tranquil weather. No one was there. A carriage and the river Thames. Now, this could be the moment, we can say, of inspiration for the romantic poet. Well, when he finished the sonnet and it was published a few years later, it was published in 1807. Now, there are variations on the story about the basic idea is that Wordsworth was enthralled by the smokeless vista before him. Now, he interpreted the city skyline as a natural landscape, beautiful and quiet. Most people not yet, they were not even going for their business. I mean, most of them were asleep during that time. Some are critical of the poet for portraying London as some kind of that beauty, and where the truth, when a romantic poet said something in that beautiful manner, while the reality is something more bleak, more it is worse than whatever is portrayed in the poem, we can understand. Now, this was the time when kids scraped a living shifting through the mud of the Thames for pennies. You can understand that kind of bleak condition of people, poor people and common people, when the river itself was stinking, and there were diseases like cholera. So the reality was not that beautiful as Wordsworth has portrayed through his sonnet. Now, we can understand that Wordsworth used to seek beauty from whatever he saw in front of him. His imagination, his realization of the inner beauty of everything in front of him was profound. And in this poem, he has portrayed a nature, a picture of London that Wordsworth would have perceived in his own mind. His feelings about what he saw at that time on the bridge and surrounding everything surrounding that, he portrayed in his own perception. Uh, and we can understand in 1802 what kind of cityscape might London have. It would be relatively small than whatever it is now. The architecture, the modest architecture, countryside, open fields and woods, not too many buildings and jungle of concrete as it is today, as it is most of the cities in the world are today. It shouldn't have been that in 1802. Now, in this sonnet, it raises a debate. The debate is between the realists and the romantics. On one hand, it's nothing more than 14 lines of sentimental invention, obviously with hyperbole. On the other, it's a fresh perspective, an enlightened vision that transcends the spirit. There is also a kind of paradox in the idea that a city can be part of nature, or that an ugly man-made city can be perceived as being a beautiful landscape. So that is the idea about the backdrop of the poem and the inspiration behind it, the form of poetry, romanticism in it, and rather the real picture of the then London. Now I will read out the poem and we will look into the meanings of the lines. The poem starts like this: composed upon Westminster Bridge, September 3, 1802. Earth has not anything to show more fair. Dull would he be of soul who could pass by. A sight so touching in its majesty. This city now doth, like a garment, wear the beauty of the morning. Silent bare, ships, towers, domes, theatres, and temples lie open unto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Never did sun more beautifully steep in his first splendour valley, rock, or hill. Ne'er saw I, never felt a calm so deep. The river glideth at his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still. So, this was the poem. Now, what we understand from this sonnet, what these lines convey. If we see the lines, the basic meaning that it says, earth has not anything to show more fair. The poet is very much impressed by the vision, by the view of nature in front of him. When he was going through and he saw this around him, around on the Westminster Bridge. The poet was awestruck, and on that time he exclaimed this, that earth has not anything to show more fair. Nothing can be fairer than this. Can anything be beautiful? Can anything be more beautiful than whatever is in front of him? Now, this is an expression of hyperbole, that this whatever he saw in front of him, around the nature in front of him, the cityscape in front of him, everything is the most beautiful thing he could have seen in his own life. Now, this here it is hyperbole. That means the poet is exaggerating his feeling for his city, whatever he saw in that cold, calm, tranquil morning. Now he says, dull would he be of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. Now you see, one kind of literary thing is used here, that is called enjambment. Now this means that it continues to the next line. It doesn't stop at a single line. You see, we start at dull would he be of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. So the meaning, the continuity of the line is not broken even in the next line. Now it says that if anyone who passes by and without even seeing it, there are so many people around us, even we also sometimes do this. We pass by different places, we don't celebrate the beauty of certain places, we don't observe certain places of nature, and we don't appreciate that beauty, but we just pass by. And the poet says that someone who would do that is a very dull person. As simple as that, he is saying this beauty is worth appreciating. So one must stop and be awestruck by this beauty. Now he says, this city now doth, like a garment, wear the beauty of the morning. He is actually personifying the city. The poet is personifying his city of London, and he says that London is wearing the beauty of this morning, which is obviously silent and bare beauty. That means this beauty is easily seeable, easily perceptible, and silent. There is a sense of tranquility, a calmness, unlike the chaos and the cacophony of people, carriages, carts, and so many other things in a city. Except all this cacophony and noise, this is a tranquil situation, a calm situation. And this silent, bare beauty of the morning, the city is wearing it like a garment. The city is covered by this beauty. So the poet is actually personifying the city here, and he is appreciating, he is worshipping the beauty of the city in that morning. Even we understand that in our city, if we go out in morning like around 4 a.m. or 5 a.m., we will be awestruck by the beauty of our own city, Calcutta, and we will be awestruck by the difference it makes, like during a daytime at around 11 a.m. or 12 a.m., whatever the city is, and whatever the city looks like at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. is very different, and we will always be awestruck by that. A person who enjoys beauty, a person who appreciates beauty will always be awestruck by that beauty and start appreciating it. And obviously, the poet is personifying his city, that London is like a person now who wears a garment, and this garment is nothing but the beauty. Now, so what is it? There is use of simile. The simile is the garment. Okay, so the beauty is compared with a kind of garment. Now, this literary device is called simile. Now, the next part, uh, ships, towers, domes, theatres, and temples lie open unto the fields and to the sky. Look at the enjambment used here. The continuity of the line is not broken by the change of the lines. Ships, towers, domes, theatres, and temples lie, where all these things are the things which are present in a city. When you go to the city, there is a port, and around the port there will be ships. Then in a city there will be different towers. Towers for in today's world we have towers for mobile phone connections, but that time it was not there. But the towers like long buildings, they are also called towers, and several other towers like electrical towers and all these things, whatever actually define a city. Or you go in a city and you see buildings, towers, all these things, then big domes, then obviously theaters, temples also. These all of these components of a city, they all lie. They lie open unto the fields. Now, what the fields are here? The landscapes. So they are open unto the fields, and they are under the sky. So, and to the sky. Now, he basically says that at this morning hour, the city is so silent, so calm and tranquil, that all these components of the cities, which are always crowded by the people, are always chaotic. They are lying open unto the fields and to the sky. Now, the nature is coming in. On one side, there is the man-made city, all these artificial things made by man, and on the other side, there is the field, the sky, the parts of nature, more gigantic than these things of the city. Now, he obviously puts these two things on two sides. One, the nature is serving as a big lap, and everything lies on the lap of the nature. That he tries to say. Then he says, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Look at this line when he says, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. That means he tries to say that in a rather industrialized London, in the daytime when the industries have started and the chimneys start to eject all the smokes, the air becomes so polluted that it is very much impossible to look at all these structures in a city, and they are merged, they get faded because of the smokes. And on this time of the day, when the industries are not at all started, there is no smoke in the air. The air is so pure, the air is so clean, without pollution, no smoke is there, and everything is actually looking so bright and glittering. And that is the thing the poet tries to stress on, that conflict, that what we have caused this nature, our industrialization and all these human interventions have caused so much pain to the nature. We have polluted the nature, and the beauty is not anymore there, the beauty is fading away. And in this morning hour, when the humans are still sleeping, when the industries are off, the industries are closed, at this time the air is so smokeless, less polluted, and the city looks so beautiful. Next line. Never did sun more beautifully steep in his first splendor, valley, rock, or hill. Now the poet is basically using hyperbole to say that the sun, it has it is more beautiful now. It was never as beautiful as it is now. And in his first splendor, valley, rock, or hill, the sun rays are so down, and the splendor, the spark is coming out. Never saw I, never felt a calm so deep. His hyperbole gets stronger when he says that all these things he never saw, and he felt a calmness, a sense of tranquility, a sense of less sound, less noise, a kind of uh, happiness that comes out of calmness. And he never felt this so deep in him. The river glideth at his own sweet will. Now he is again personifying the river Thames. It glides at his own sweet will. The poet personifies the river, and it glides his will in the way which is sweet. The poet beautifies the river. Look at the backdrop. I said that the Thames, because of this speedy industrialization on that time, in reality was rather stinking. But now in his poem, the poet William Wordsworth says the river is gliding at his own sweet will. Now this is very much in contrast to the reality. But the poet somehow, because of his romanticism, he has managed to imagine the true nature of the river, which is actually covered by the human intervention. Today, whatever the river in that time of the contemporary time, whatever the river was looking like, all the stinking and all, everything was caused by human beings. But when there were no human interventions, when nothing was there, when the river was only there, and the river was very clear and sweet, and the poet looks at that, removing the veil of the pollution. Then he says, Dear God, the very houses seem asleep. He says the houses are asleep. Now, somewhere he is personifying the houses of this city. The poet every time is personifying everything in the city and every inanimate object of the nature. Now, the poet is personifying the houses and says the houses are asleep. And he says, Dear God, the very houses seem asleep. The poet is very much astonished, because London on that time was like woken up. Everyone is awake. Nobody sleeps. Everyone works. And everyone is so busy in their lives working. And when the poet says that everyone is asleep on that moment, which he might have never seen that way, that's why his exclamation, and that's why using Dear God, and he says that houses are themselves asleep. Then he says, and all that mighty heart is lying still. Now in this place he says all that mighty heart. Now heart, heart, it signifies life. And he says all that mighty heart is lying still. What he means? He means that the life is lying still. It is maybe he and his sister Dorothy only there, and everyone else is lying still. Everyone else looks like they are not there, because uh, they are all like a statue there. They are all in their houses, lying in their houses, exactly like they are not alive anymore. But they are the mighty hearts, the life force in them that is mighty, that has power. And when the day will arrive, this is the very morning, but when in a later time the day will arrive, like around 8, 7 or 8, on that time everyone will wake up and the life will be back to its own chaos. But before that chaos, the poet is enjoying the calmness, the deep tranquility of nature. And he's personifying literally everything of the city and comparing them to certain things of the beauty, and expressing his exclamations and hyperbolically presenting the beauty of the nature which is surrounding London, the beauty which is covered up by the pollution caused by the humans, and the tininess of the human lives, the tininess of everything that has been created by the human civilization under the lap of nature, as nature is the only truth, and the virgin beauty of the nature, the virginity of the nature as a whole, is the only truth that lies below every kind of veils. And that is what the poet tries to unleash. That is what the poet tries to see. The poet tries to see through everything that is blocking that vision, every obstruction caused by humans, every obstructions caused by several kinds of pollutions that the realists will never be able to see. The realists will never be able to understand and perceive the beauty of the nature that even lies below that polluted face. The poet sees that inner beauty. The poet saw to that. And that's where William Wordsworth uses his mind, his mental intellect, his capability of romanticism, and writes this poem, such a beautiful poem, a sonnet composed upon Westminster Bridge, September 3, 1802. Now, if we see in a more moderate analysis, whatever the analysis I said is my own. Now I will use a source from the internet. There is a good analysis over there, and I will read out the analysis that has been written for every line in the poem. Now this analysis says, for the first line of the poem, earth has not anything to show more fair. Now what does it mean? The first line models the rest of the poem. That means it gives the shape to the poem, hinting at its main themes. Now we are going to the themes, giving information about the speaker and previewing the way in which the poem will both adhere to and subvert the Italian sonnet form. Earth introduces the theme of nature versus civilization. As I told when I was reading out every line of the poem and explaining the meanings, there is a theme and a conflict between nature and civilization. Every time I said, on one side there is the civilization created by man, and on the other side there is the landscape, the sky, that is a part of nature. So there is a theme conflict, that is nature versus civilization. Now this explained by earth, which consists of both. The title indicates that the setting of the poem is Westminster Bridge, a man-made structure in an urban environment that spans a natural feature. Rather than start with the specific view from the bridge, however, the poem starts with a comprehensive view of the entire planet. Earth, which has the ability to show, is personified. Now this attention to earth tells the reader that the poem will consider the city's place within the natural world. The line also gives the reader information about the speaker. There is a lot of confidence in the opening declaration. By professing certainty about the highly arguable claim that nothing is more fair than the view from the bridge, the speaker emphasizes that this is a poem told from the limited and possibly unreliable perspective of one person. In its imperfect iambic pentameter, line's meter imitates the way this person might actually talk. Not every foot in the line is unstressed stress. Now, that being said, I must explain what do we mean by iambic pentameter. When we write poems, there are certain meters we have to follow. Now, basically, this meter is a combination of the unstressed and the stressed, or the stressed and the unstressed syllables. Now, when we say in the iambic foot, that means one iambic foot consists of one unstressed syllable and a stressed syllable. Now, syllable is what? In one breath, what we can pronounce is called syllable. Like, if I say anything, when I say anything, I'm saying N, I'm saying ithing, N, E, thing. These are the syllables. So now some of the syllables I am putting stress and some of the syllables are there I am keeping unstressed. Now the combination of this unstressed and stressed gives the iambic foot. Now if the iambic foot is repeated 5 times, that generates the iambic pentameter. Now this is the length of every line in a poem, and obviously it follows a rhythm. This rhythm of the poem keeps the idea of the poem, and there is obviously a rhyme scheme that is followed in any poem. Now in this poem, in this sonnet, Wordsworth actually uses some kind of imperfect iambic pentameter. That means the rules have always not been followed. The line's meters imitates the way this person might actually talk. Not every foot in the line is unstressed, stressed. However, it would be if it were written purely in the iambic pentameter. So if I would have to say, earth has not anything to show more fair. Now the first foot is actually a trochee, a syllable pair that is stressed, unstressed, the reverse of the iamb, earth has. So the first foot is actually reversed. I am stressing first, then unstressing. So iamb is reversed, and that is called the trochee. If you see the iambic pentameter, if you reverse the iambic foot, that becomes the trochaic foot, and that gives the maybe trochaic pentameter can be also generated from that. But generally, the iambic pentameter is followed in this sonnet form, and this iambic pentameter is somewhere imperfect in the sense that the first foot in this first line is trochaic in nature, and then the next foot is iambic in nature. Next, all the foots are iambic in nature. When I am saying earth has not anything to show more fair, so I am putting the stress on earth, and the first foot, earth has, becomes trochaic in nature. But all the other foots that are there, not an, is iambic in nature. Ithing, to show more fair, are all iambic foots in nature. So as a whole, this serves as the iambic pentameter line, but the first foot being trochaic in nature, so we are saying this iambic pentameter is imperfectly used in this poem. So that is the idea I have given in the idea of the themes and the foots followed in this sonnet, Italian form of the sonnet Wordsworth wrote in this poem. Thank you. And for further meanings, put comments, like, share, obviously. For if you have any other queries regarding the poem, put comments. I will reply to the comments. I will also reply for questions regarding the poem, and I will clarify the doubts. And before ending, I must give credits, because at the beginning of the poem I explained the backdrop of the city of London when this poem was written. So from where I took that data, from where I took that information to explain that backdrop, the idea of romanticism versus realism, that data is actually taken from an analysis written by Andrew Spacey in the year, which was updated actually on January 7, 2020 itself. So only the backdrop part of the poem, the background of the poem, the scene, the actual scenery of the city, and the basic conflict between the romantics and the realists, all that part I took it from the writing of Andrew Spacey. And the next part that starts with the poem itself and my own analysis, my own understanding, and line by line meaning of the poem. And the last part where I told about the iambic pentameter's basic idea, that part is basically coming from a site called litcharts.com, and that has written an analysis of this poem where the idea of this iambic pentameter which is used in this poem is much explained. Thank you. Like, comment, and share. And for any queries, for any questions, do feel free to comment and I will answer. Thank you.